carried a burden for too long on my own, and I wasn't created to bear it alone. I hear your invitation to let it all go. Yeah, I see it now. I'm laying it down, and I know that I need you. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, oh, oh. You saw my condition, had a plan from the start. Your Son for redemption, the price for my heart. And I don't have a context for that kind of love. I don't understand, I can't comprehend. All I know is I need you. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart found a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, oh, again and again and again and again. Oh, oh, my heart has been in your sights long before my first breath. Running into your arms is running to life from death, and I feel this rush deep in my chest. Your mercy is calling out, just as I am. You pull me in. All I know is I need you. Oh, run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, oh, again and again and again and again. Oh, oh, I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart found a surgeon, my soul found a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, oh, oh.
Well, tonight we will be wrapping up a series we've been calling The Supreme Life. So hopefully throughout this series you've learned a few things, but not only have you learned them, but you've applied them to your life. And so the goal of this series was to show you what it looks like to live out and to accomplish a supreme life. And so with kicking off the new year, we all have these New Year's resolutions, areas we want to get better at. So I figured that this would be a great series to kick off the year with. And so in week 1, we talked about the importance of giving our lives to Christ. And so in week 1 of the series, I talked about how we would have baptism weekend coming up. So that's actually next weekend. So in big services, we're going to have a pool in the middle of our sanctuary, and we're going to be celebrating the new life that God has been doing in us. And so if there are any of you out there who want to make that decision to give their life to Christ and to then be baptized and celebrate that, we would love for you guys to partake in that. So make sure you talk with me or a leader afterwards. We don't want you guys to put it off any longer. And so then in week 2, we talked about living our lives in response to what God has done for us. And then in week 3, we talked about our roles, and specifically within our family. So we as children, we are to be respectful and to be obedient to our parents. Which brings us to the last message in this series. And so last week, I mentioned this game Rocket League, which I had been playing quite a bit of. It was something I was doing a lot of. But funny enough, I think I only played one single game this whole weekend. For me, I don't know about you guys, but I kind of go in spurts with kind of stuff. So I'll find a video game that I like, and I'll play it for a month or two. And then I'll take a break from that, and I'll binge watch a couple TV series. And then after that, I'll find a couple movies that I want to watch, and I'll just go through just that rotation of those 3 things. And so what brought up my interest in movies for this week is I saw a trailer, and it was a trailer for Kong versus Godzilla. Yeah, we got a fan out there. One single fan. Yeah. And I was about to say, I know this movie's not for everybody. It's not something that everybody enjoys. But I think it's a pretty cool idea that this giant gorilla, the size of buildings, fights against a dinosaur that shoots fire out of his mouth. I feel like that's just the perfect plot for a story, and I mean, it looks cool as well. But this week, I've been catching up on movies that I haven't seen. I've kind of pushed off. But this week, I decided, hey, I'm going to sit down, and I'm going to watch some of these movies. And so one of the movies that I've heard is good, and so I decided to watch was the movie Wonder Woman, which came out in 2017. So not the brand new one that just came out, but the one a few years ago. For me, I'd seen bits and pieces of it. I think my parents watched it without me. I think I was at Sammy's house. This was before I moved out, so they watched it without me, and I came home, and it was at the end. So I was able to watch the end of the movie. But I'd always heard good things about it, and it's even got a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. So obviously, it's a really good movie if Rotten Tomatoes scores that high. So I decided to watch it, and through it, I realized that towards the end of the movie, there was a message that tied in with my message for us this weekend. And so we have a short little clip from the Wonder Woman movie. So we've been doing at the movies here at the church and Big Church. So I figured we might as well tie that into what we're doing here in the high school. And so spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, this is the end of the movie. So if you haven't seen it and you want to see it, I'm sorry, I'm about to ruin it for you. Check out the screen.
You're wrong about them. They're everything you say, but so much more.
They do not deserve your protection!
It's not about deserve. It's about what you believe. And I believe in love.
Then I will destroy you!
Goodbye, brother.
Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but when I see a cool fight scene, it just makes me want to kick through a wall. So I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but that's how I'm feeling right now. But in this scene, Diana, who is Wonder Woman, is fighting against Ares, who is the god of war. And so throughout this movie, she's struggling with the idea of evil. And so it's been her mission through the movie to destroy evil. And she feels like once she destroys Ares, then humans will stop being evil and they will turn good. But she finds out that man and themselves are evil. And so Ares, right before this, is trying to get her to come to his side so that they can wipe out humanity and start all over. But she doesn't join forces in him. And then in the scene we just watched, Ares says that humans do not deserve her protection. Like they don't deserve her to stand up for them. But she then goes on to say it's not about what they deserve, but it's about what she believes. And she says that she believes in love and is simply saying that love is going to conquer all and it's going to defeat evil in the end. And so she says all that, does that cool little attack or whatever it was that she did, destroyed Ares, and the battle was won. And so tonight, we're going to talk about love. And not just love like romantically, but loving others around us. So we've talked about loving God and giving our life to Him. But now we're going to talk about, in response, loving others. And so in John 13:35 it says, "By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." So we as Christians, we have this unique calling to love everyone. And I know it's easy to love those people who are nice to you or reciprocate that love back to you, but that's not what we are simply called to do. We're called to love everyone. The person that hates you or that you hate, or right now that you hate, or somebody that you're enemies with. We are called to love everyone. And so today I want to look at a story of somebody who was loved despite them not deserving it. And I know this series we've been focusing on the book of Colossians, but we're going to go off of that. And so I'm a terrible person, I know. But at the end, we're going to wrap it back around and finish with a verse from Colossians. And so for our story today, we will be looking at Luke 19, starting with verse 1. So it says, "He entered Jericho and was passing through." So Jesus was the one who entered. "And so behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. And he was seeking to see who Jesus was. But on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was small in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way." And so the scene sets up by telling us that Jesus is passing through Jericho. And so Jericho is an important and ancient city, and it's a very prosperous city. So there's a lot of wealthy people that live within it. So it tells us where it's at, and then it goes on to introduce us to a specific character, and that character is Zacchaeus. And so Zacchaeus is my great-great-great-great-great-great-great uncle. So my name's Zachary, his name is Zacchaeus. I feel like there was a direct correlation to our names, so he has to be my uncle. But it then goes on to tell us that Zacchaeus was a tax collector. Okay, we don't need it anymore. Just the one time. Next slide. Okay, thank you. Sheesh. Me and Sammy didn't work on that before the service. But if you were a tax collector, as the sound alluded to, you were pretty bad news. Like you weren't liked very much by the people in your community. And so not only was Zacchaeus a tax collector, but he was the chief tax collector. So he was the big kahuna. He was over everyone. And so I know most of you guys don't deal with taxes at your age, but I can inform you that taxes aren't a lot of fun, and the Jews weren't fans of taxes either. But they also hated the giving process of their taxes. And so it was a practice called tax farming. And so what this was is tax collectors wouldn't just go around and collect taxes at a set rate. Like it wasn't standard for everybody. So these tax collectors would actually go out and set their own rates. And so they would make it higher than it should have been, and they would keep the extra money, and they would then become wealthy off of it. And so these tax collectors in their areas were really well off. And like I mentioned, Jericho, it was very wealthy, a lot of wealthy people in this community, so you can imagine the tax collectors were very well off. And so Zacchaeus was not only one of these guys, but he was the chief of them all. So I can imagine that he was very disliked in his community. But Zacchaeus seemed very interested in this Jesus character, this Jesus figure. He probably heard all these stories of the miracles that Jesus had done. He probably heard about how Jesus was a great teacher. And so he wanted to see him for himself. But the problem was, it says that Zacchaeus was a short guy. Like he was small in stature. And so I know a lot of us like visual aid. So a person that is short in stature that we can compare Zacchaeus to is Isaiah. So if you look at Isaiah, he's a small stature guy. So if you think of Zacchaeus, hey, stay back, don't fight me, please. I'm just kidding. I love you, Isaiah, and don't quit the band. I need you to sing. We do not want me singing. But it says that Zacchaeus was small in stature, and so it put him at a disadvantage. And so, you know, when like we do like family pictures, like the short people are in the front and the bigger in the back, like that's not how it was whenever people were gathering around to see Jesus. They weren't nice like that. People just wanted to see Jesus for themselves. And so if you were short and you got there late, you were at a disadvantage because you couldn't see over the crowd. And so you know what he did? He climbed up in a sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see. That's like Emily was singing it with me. Yeah, Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. He climbed up in a sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see. Yes, that's all I got. That's all I got. You come down. Okay. Thank you, Emily, for finishing that for me. But that was a classic kind of church song that I sang when I was a kid. But Zacchaeus, he was so determined to see Jesus that he went out of his way and climbed up in a tree. And so if you think about it, that's pretty embarrassing. It's kind of childish for this grown man, this rich, wealthy tax collector, to be climbing up in a tree to simply see Jesus. But Zacchaeus, he was so persistent, and he wanted to see who Jesus was. Isaiah? That was uncalled for. Little man? You know, those little men, they just get angry really easily, so that's probably why he lashed out at me like that. But a little side note about what I just talked about. I wish more of us were willing to be made fun of to draw closer to God. Like a lot of us are caught up in the opinions of others. We care so much about what others think. But what if we were like Zacchaeus and didn't care what others thought about us? I'd imagine that a lot of our relationships with God would be a lot closer. But let's see how the story plays out for Zacchaeus in verse 5. It says, "And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, 'Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today.' So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully." See, when you step out, you stand out. Zacchaeus stepped out of his comfort zone, got in a tree, and he stood out to Jesus. And Jesus tells him to come down from that tree because he's going to come to his house and have dinner that night. And so this is something that I want all of us to replicate in our lives. It's that we aren't merely called to preach, but to build real relationships. And this is what Jesus set out to do, to build a real relationship with Zacchaeus. Like in the moment, he could have just told him, Zacchaeus, come down here. He could have shared the gospel message right then and there, and then he could have went on his way. But instead of doing it quickly, he took time out of his busy schedule to go and to meet with him, to go and to eat with him, to build a real relationship with him. He gave Zacchaeus time when nobody else would give Zacchaeus the time of day. And part of the reason why Zacchaeus wasn't given the time of day was because of his profession. And Zacchaeus was an outcast. But Jesus still sought to have a real relationship with the outcast in their community. And so Zacchaeus, he quickly got down from the tree and received Jesus. Verse 7. And when they saw it, meaning the crowd, they all grumbled. He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. And Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to those, since he is also a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. And so we see right away in verse 7 that the crowd is not happy with who Jesus has decided to take time and to build a relationship with. They're probably thinking, of all the people here to pour into, you decided to choose this guy who has stolen so much money from all of us, this sinner. Jesus, why would you spend time with him? Why would you want a relationship with him? And Jesus answers that in verse 10. He says that he has come to seek and to save the lost. And this is very similar to what Jesus said in Mark 2, verse 17. It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. See, it's not about what we deserve. Like we see from Zacchaeus that he didn't deserve Jesus' love. He didn't deserve the time that Jesus was giving him, and the crowd made that apparent. But Jesus still loved Zacchaeus despite who he was. And because of that, Zacchaeus came to believe in Jesus. He became a follower, and he then repented of his sins. And so the same thing is true with us. No matter how good of a person you think you are, you do not deserve God's love. But God still gave it to you anyway. He reached out to you. He told you to get down from that tree when nobody else would. And so I told you that I would tie it back into Colossians. So I want to read Colossians chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. It says, Walk in wisdom towards outsiders, making the best use of time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. We are called to love outsiders, be gracious in our speech, and we need to be pointing others to Jesus. And when we read the book of Colossians, this was Paul's final instructions to the church. He knew how important it was to love others. He knew how important it was to be intentional with those around us. And so some of you in this room may be a Zacchaeus in this story, a person who has been living for the world, has made a lot of mistakes, and has honestly hurt a lot of people in their time. And tonight, Jesus is telling you to come down from that tree, to draw near to him. He is showing you love even though you don't deserve it. And so tonight is the time to give your life to Christ. And for the others in here that aren't the Zacchaeus, that have already given their lives to Christ, you need to be like Jesus in this story. You need to love others even when it doesn't seem like they deserve it. Maybe it's the person who's ignored or bullied in your school. Or maybe it's the person who's hurt you in the past. You need to love and to be intentional with others. And so I'm going to read it again, John 13:35. It says, By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So let's pray. Dear God, I thank you that we get to come here again. I think sometimes we can take for granted meeting here together as a youth group and all the fun we get to have, but also spending time in worship, spending time in your word, and spending time in small groups. And God, this message of loving others isn't easy to do. It's not easy to love our enemies. It's not easy to love those who don't show that love back. But God, you were the greatest example of love, and that while we were still sinners, you died for us. You told us to come down from that tree, and you desired to have a real, authentic relationship with us. So God, I pray as we go through this week, we draw near to you. We accept the love that you have shown us, and we then spread it around to those around us. God, I praise your name. Amen.
I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. You came along and put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Yes, I know it's true. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley, and there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me. Yeah. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing, turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn games into gardens. You turn